It is midnight in Washington, 5 in London, and 2 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. Here are the top stories making headlines at this hour. Medical doctors in the country push ahead with a one-day strike on this Monday. This in protest against the government's medical policies, including one following telemedicine and for-profit hospitals. Authorities are searching for clues to find out the cause of sudden disappearance of a Malaysian Airlines plane over the South China Sea this past weekend. Now, Interpol is also investigating more suspect passports used by passengers who boarded the missing flight. And the Korean government unveils measures designed to prevent leaks of personal information. This following a series of security breaches by financial institutions that affected tens of millions of people here in Korea. Now, we'll have those stories and more, but first, let us begin this Monday afternoon with the medical doctors of the Korean Medical Association going on a one-day strike. Now, this is in response to a government plan that enact reforms in the medical sector, and in turn, the government has vowed to come down on the walkout with a heavy hand. And we are just getting reports that the health ministry is releasing that 29% of the medical doctors have go on strike as of 1 p.m. this afternoon. Our Kwon Soa has our top story.
A one-day strike led by the Korean Medical Association began earlier this Monday morning. Doctors won't be providing medical services, and many hospitals across the nation will be closed. However, preliminary estimates imply that there were few doctors participating in today's walkout, considering the 77% of doctors who voted in favor of the strike and the Korean Intern Resident Association's earlier announcement of its participation. Following Monday's walkout, the strike will transition to a work-to-rule action starting Tuesday and running through March 23rd, meaning doctors won't work more than 40 hours a week and will treat patients for no longer than 15 minutes. A full 6-day strike is then planned to begin on the 24th, which, unlike today's action, could also include the closing of emergency rooms and intensive care centers. The government has vowed to take legal measures, including a business suspension, against those taking part in the strike and has begun distributing orders telling doctors to return to work immediately.
The walkout coming in the middle of the negotiation process between the government and the Medical Association is unacceptable. It's clearly an illegal action that puts public health at risk.
It's regrettable that we had to make the extreme decision of closing hospitals and not treating patients. I'm resentful toward the government.
The KMA strike was called in protest of a government plan to introduce a telemedicine system that would allow for patients in remote areas to be diagnosed via webcam, smartphone, or even email. KMA doctors say it will impair the quality of medical services. The Medical Association is also up in arms over a government move to run for-profit subsidiaries. While the government says it will improve the nation's medical industry, the KMA says it will only lead to a hike in medical bills. Doctors are concerned the reforms could eventually lead to privatization of the medical sector. In order to minimize inconveniences on Monday, usually the busiest day for hospitals, the government has ordered public health centers to extend their hours. The medical strike stands to be the largest in 14 years, and with negotiations between both sides at a stalemate, some fear it will continue for the long term. Kwon Soa, ARIRANG News.
The Malaysian Airlines plane, which disappeared over the South China Sea, could have been disintegrated in midair, says investigators. Debris that could belong to the plane has been spotted, and dozens of planes and boats have been scouring the area since dawn. Now, Interpol is also investigating some more suspect passports used by passengers who boarded the missing flight. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
A Vietnamese plane has spotted possible debris, a door and a section of the tail, from the missing Malaysia Airlines jet that vanished on Saturday with 239 people on board. People of boats and planes are attempting to confirm the find now the sun is up. This comes as officials investigating the disappearance are said to be narrowing the focus of their inquiries on the possibility that the plane disintegrated mid-flight. A source close to preliminary investigation told Reuters that the fact there doesn't appear to be much debris could indicate the aircraft broke up at around 35,000 feet. Asked about the possibility of an explosion, such as a bomb, the source said there was no evidence yet of foul play. Terrorism is not being ruled out, especially as Interpol has confirmed at least 2 passengers on board have been traveling on fake passports.
On the possibility of hijack, we are not ruling any possibility. However, it's important to state that our main concern is to focus our effort in finding the missing aircraft.
Interpol says a check of all documents used to board the plane had revealed more suspect passports that were being further investigated. Just an hour into the flight, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared and is presumed to have crashed off the coast of Vietnam. Despite being in the very early stages of the investigation, the Malaysian jet's disappearance appears to be among rarest of aviation disasters, as whatever happened did so when the jetliner was cruising. Takeoff and in particular, final approach and landing are the most dangerous parts of a flight and appears when most accidents occur. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Now, shifting our focus to North Korea. North Koreans flocked to the polls on Sunday as North Korea held its first parliamentary elections under the leadership of Kim Jong-un. Kim is expected to use the poll to promote officials loyal to him and further consolidate his power. Kim Min-ji reports.
North Korea on Sunday held nationwide elections for a new rubber-stamp parliament, the first under the leadership of Kim Jong-un. The elections, which are held every 5 years, is expected to shed some light on the power shift taking place in the regime and will likely be used to promote officials depending on their loyalty to the young leader. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said all voters that are registered went to the polls, with the exception of those who were abroad or at sea. The Supreme People's Assembly fields one candidate for each of the 687 constituencies, with the voters only required to cast yes or no ballots. The results are expected to be announced later Monday. Kim himself was registered as a candidate in the constituency of Mount Baekdu, a mountain on the Korean peninsula, which Pyongyang describes as a birthplace of Kim and his late father. The Korean Central News Agency said Kim voted at the Kim Il-sung University of Politics, along with top officials including Choi Ryong-hae, director of the General Political Bureau of the Korean People's Army. It also said Kim was accompanied by his younger sister, Kim Yo-jung. It's the first time the younger Kim has been mentioned on the state media, although she has been seen on North Korean television before.
Kim Jong-un was accompanied by Choi Ryong-hae of the Korean People's Army, along with other dedicated workers including Kim Kyung-ok, Hwang Byung-seo, and Kim Yo-jung.
Kim Yo-jung was listed along with senior officials of the Central Committee of the ruling Workers' Party.
Hwang Byung-seo is a vice department director of the Workers' Party, which means that Kim Yo-jung could hold a similar position because her name followed Hwang.
North Korea experts say she will likely take on the role of her aunt Kim Kyung-hee. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, down in this country, the South Korean government has unveiled a set of measures designed to prevent leaks of personal information following a series of security breaches by financial institutions that affected tens of millions of people here in Korea. Our Na Hyun-kyung has the details.
From the latter half of this year, financial institutions will only be able to ask for customers' resident registration numbers at the initial application stage. After that, people will not be asked to provide their registration numbers, but instead be asked to verify their identity through other safer means. The registration numbers have been at the center of a recent series of high-level personal information security breaches, and toughening their use is a key part of a package unveiled by the government on Monday to fight widespread leaks of personal data. Financial institutions will also not be allowed to keep collected information for more than 5 years after the final transaction.
Apart from the information that's absolutely necessary, all other data that the financial institution either has or has provided to a third party will be destroyed. The police and the prosecution will jointly and indefinitely crack down on breaches.
The government has also tightened the penalty system. If a company is found to have used illegally obtained personal information to make profits, it will be fined 3% of the total sales made through using the data. Also, a fine of up to 5 billion won, or roughly $4.7 million will be levied on firms that leak customer information. Officials reaffirmed that customers will only have to give just their basic information, such as their registration number and date of birth, for receiving financial services. People will also be given the option to retract on an agreement to provide personal data and also block telemarketing calls from financial institutions. 나현경, ARIRANG News.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. The Korean government says it will beef up the country's information infrastructure this year to fuel growth and boost competitiveness. ARIRANG News Kim Young-gil has more.
Korea's Science Ministry says it will inject 4.9 trillion won, or some $4.6 billion into the country's information technology sector this year in order to fuel economic growth and enhance the country's overall competitiveness. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning says the money will be used to fund numerous projects in central government agencies that were initiated by regional governments. $1 billion will be used to strengthen IT research, while another billion will be used to upgrade the nation's information and communications technology infrastructure. Key projects to receive large amounts of funding include the country's digital infrastructure and initiatives to increase the country's presence in cloud computing, mobile services, and next-generation mobile wireless technology. The Trade Ministry says ICT exports have increased 8.4% this year from last to $12.8 billion, fueled by an increase in exports of mobile phones and semiconductors. That gave Korea an ICT trade surplus of $6.6 billion in February, which is a 1.6% increase from the same month last year. Global technology research group Gartner says the world's ICT market will grow 3.6% this year, fueled by a recovery in the smartphone and semiconductor markets. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
Korea is one of 5 Asian nations where the income gap is increasing rapidly. A recent Asian Development Bank report on income inequality in 28 Asian nations shows the income gap in Korea widened at the 5th fastest pace between 1990 and 2010. Now, income inequality worsened most in China, followed by Indonesia, Laos, and Sri Lanka during that period, and the Bank of Korea said on Monday, citing that report. The bank said globalization and technological developments have led to rapid growth in Asian countries, but many of them have failed to improve their income distribution systems. Ahead of its latest legal tussle with Apple, Samsung has reportedly decided to withdraw some patent claims from its latest litigation with a U.S. firm. Foss Patents, a German-based blog that specializes in intellectual property rights, says Samsung has filed a stipulation with the U.S. District Court of California to narrow their case by dismissing 3 claims regarding standard essential patents. Now, the owner of a standard essential patent can use it to prevent others from making, using, and selling the patented invention without permission. Samsung has earlier filed for 5 claims against Apple, including 2 non-standard essential patents. Now, this news comes as Apple and Samsung are set to return to court on March 31st in order to iron out their ongoing patent dispute. Libyan government and rebel forces continue to trade threats over the loading of crude from a North Korea-flagged tanker amid a standoff between the two sides at a port in eastern Libya. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Libyan authorities have dispatched a force to a port held by armed protesters to stop a North Korean-flagged tanker from leaving with crude sold without government permission Culture Minister Haif Alamin said Sunday that the force consists of qualified naval officers and revolutionaries, or former rebels now being paid by the government, and adds that it has the authorization to strike the tanker with force if it does not comply.
Orders were given and all efforts are being undertaken to stop and seize the tanker, if necessary by a strike, if it does not follow orders.
The 37,000-ton Morning Glory was docked at the terminal of Essider, which is one of the 3 ports seized by rebels, which is being used to press state authorities for a bigger share of oil revenues. A local daily says the ship has been loaded with $36 million of crude. Over the weekend, Prime Minister Ali Zidane said the military would bomb the Morning Glory if it tried to leave the port. The captain of the North Korean-flagged oil tanker responded that local militia on board did not allow them to depart. The rebels say any attack on the tanker would be a declaration of war. The incident illustrates the deepening turmoil in the OPEC producer, which has failed to rein in fighters who helped oust Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, on a different note, the social networking and mobile communication services are shoring up their resources as mobile messaging sees a surge in popularity. Our Son Jung-in has this report.
Companies in the social networking and mobile communication sector are enjoying the benefits of a robust and growing mobile messaging market as they gear up for a battle that would determine who will become the top brand for more than 1 billion smartphone users worldwide. In Korea, search engine Naver is #1 thanks to its mobile messaging app Line. Line's annual sales last year stood at $427 million, a 690% increase from a year earlier. The messaging application has grown to more than 370 million subscribers since its creation in 2011. Naver's market value in Korea is $27 billion, the 5th largest in the country, and there's only a small gap between it and 4th place SK Hynix and 3rd place Hyundai Mobis. Naver saw its stock value skyrocket after it split from NHN last August. That landed the company in 6th place, allowing it to overtake Kia Motors in December. And just last month, it beat POSCO to take 5th place. In the global mobile messaging market, Facebook is also back on track since topping its sales target in the 3rd quarter of last year. Its recent acquisition of fast-growing messaging startup WhatsApp has also helped it maintain its momentum. Social media giant Twitter is also going strong. Its initial public offering was priced at $26 in November last year, but now its share price has nearly doubled to roughly $54. China's biggest internet company, Tencent, which operates Weibo, the Chinese version of Twitter, has 600 million registered users and a share price of nearly $80. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And taking a brief look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour, Seoul shares were higher slightly to a one-week low early on Monday as investors were kept on toes by the fluid situation in Ukraine, while risk sentiment was dented by worse than expected data from China over the weekend. As of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi was down a whopping 1%, trading at 1955, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq was also trading in negative territory by 0.3%. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading weaker against the greenback at roughly 1,066 won. And now it's time for our regular arts and culture segment. And for that, our Im Yoon-hee joins us live in the studio. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
You know, we can't seem to get away from this frozen flurry that's just taking over this country.
Exactly. It seems like Frozen is impacting everyone's life in one way or another. Just this past weekend, I must have heard Frozen being sung by people at least every day. enjoyed by all ages.
Right, definitely. I mean, it's really amazing how it also broke the 10 million mark in the cinemas.
Exactly. So the only other imported foreign film to have done that is Avatar a few years back, and I don't know if you recall, it left quite the impression here in South Korea. And now Frozen, I believe, is on a whole different level because the books for Frozen are just flying off the shelves, bestsellers, all the charts. The soundtracks and covers of the soundtracks are also maintaining their positions on these charts just week after week.
Right, and so I'm curious, Frozen is a well-made animation by Disney, and Korea is, of course, aiming to become one of the leaders in the global animation realm. How does Korean animation fare compared to these?
Exactly, so Korean animation is known for being high quality. Where the problem arises, it says that Korean animation is not up there in terms of content, that the content is not applicable to all ages. Now, there are some other reasons why Korean animation has not become as influential as, say, Disney's Frozen. And so let's take a look in this next report.
Korea's animation industry is in the midst of becoming one of the world leaders in animation production. With the international success of the Pororo series, Korea's animation industry has been making its presence known in the global market. Along with the popular Penguin, Larva is another Korean animation success. Since its debut in 2011, the short, slapstick humor of two lovable slugs has been making it onto screens worldwide. Geared towards audiences of all ages, the Larva series has become the hope of carrying Korean animation further onto the global market. But there's a problem with the Korean animation industry. Riding on the tail end of the Korean wave, Korean animation is often left with very little resources.
There is no security with Korean animation. We have to support many things with our own funds. The money for animation is always decreasing, so the manpower of animation decreases as well.
The problem arises with the distribution of funds. 60 to 70% of funds designated for Korean television go directly into dramas, and only 10% is allotted to Korean animation. The remaining money is used for advertising and marketing of Korean television. The result is a lack of Korean animation in the global market, even though the talent and ability is very much present.
In actuality, we need about $30 billion to go into the television fund every year. But even if $30 billion would go into the fund, the government never inquires about the animation part.
In Canada and France and other developed countries, animation is recognized as an influence in the emotional development of children. Therefore, funding for television is often supported.
Right now, in Korean broadcasting companies, the content for children is being looked at closely because the broadcasting culture is important to cultivate and develop for the sake of children.
The demand for animation in Korea is very clearly present, seen by the response to the recent hit Frozen. South Korea is the biggest market for Frozen outside of the US, bringing in over $75 million. Korean animation has a long way to go until it catches up to some of the heavy hitters from the States, but the potential is there.
Well, I am looking forward to Korea's future in the global animation realm. And also, I know that a lot of Korean animators have been involved in major global animation projects.
Exactly. So Korean animation is outsourced all over the world, including the US. Now, they do want to continue making more animation, Korean animation, in-house from start to finish, like Pororo and Larva, which are excellent examples of Korean animation. So
definitely
much to look forward to.
Much to look forward to. All right, thank you, Uni, for that, and we'll talk to you tomorrow with other arts and culture news.
My pleasure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Although we started off our Monday with a cold morning, it's now gotten warmer with highs of up to 12 degrees. However, the air is still very dry and windy out, so be careful not to start with any fires. Now, for more details, let's shift over to our satellite map. Today we have clear skies over the nation and it looks like it will stay that way until tomorrow. However, we have rain nationwide in the forecast for Wednesday, which should get rid of the dry weather. Now going over to our readings. Seoul will top out at 9 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will get up to 10 and 12 degrees respectively. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island is sunny with a high of 9. Dokdo will make it up to 3, while Mangkungang tops out at 3. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and back to you, Kanyang.
All right, thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's all for me at this hour. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with Business Today at 4 p.m. Korea time.